Arigato here with Albany News World Banana Corporation, and we have a special guest today, Manolo from Pastors of Peace. Take it away, Manolo.
Well, Pastors for Peace is an organization that, through civil disobedience, through popular education, has been trying to change the policy of war and blockade against the people of Cuba. During the last 20-something years, we've been taking humanitarian aid on these buses as a way of challenging our government. You know, they keep telling us that you can't take aid to Cuba, that you can't love our brothers and sisters in Cuba, and we say to the contrary, that we're going all the way to Cuba, that we want to show them our love, that, you know, Cuba's done so much for the world, so we at least could do something for them. And we're almost getting there. It's 2015 and the tides are changing. We're closer to ending the blockade, but now it's about making that final push. And that's why we're out on the road again this year. We're stopping in over 60 cities across the United States and Canada, and driving our way down to Mexico to again tell the deaf government in Washington that times have changed, that now is the time to end the blockade. We can't let another generation of Cubans grow up under this terrible policy.
Manolo is living in Cuba right now, and I think that would be of interest to many of you. He is studying at a seminary, and he is the liaison to the Latin School of the Americas, and he knows a lot about the students that have gone and that are graduating. I think he has some very special things to share with us. But I wanted you to get an idea of what a rigorous trip this is. And one of the things that's interesting, their meals and their bedding depend on the kindness of the people along the route. And so from Buffalo to Schenectady, Albany to Hartford, on to where?
On to New York City, Columbus, Ohio, Carbondale, Illinois, Oklahoma City.
And there are 8 routes throughout the United States. The only other thing I was going to say is that when you do concrete aid, you get many people to touch your project. So, Manolo, it's yours.
Don't leave too soon, because I'll be honest, I woke up very tired this morning. It has been the last few days, the last few weeks have been very grueling, because I had already been doing some events in other parts up in New England. We have been getting this caravan ready. We've been under a lot of pressure. But waking up and getting to here, getting to Schenectady and seeing Mabel just brought my heart up. I'm serious. And the reason I say this is not to make Mabel feel any better, but it is because of people like Mabel and people like her all across the country, people who are in this room right now, that we have gotten to where we are in terms of U.S.-Cuba relations. So I say we need to applaud ourselves right now. For people who've been following Cuba for many years, people who've been working to end the blockade for many years, December 17th was a wonderful day, because the U.S. finally had to recognize to the world that this damn policy just does not work. It's a failed policy. They thought they could starve the Cuban people. They thought they could use war to bring them to their knees. And yet the Cubans are still standing. And we're still standing with them.
Yes.
And we're not saying that this is the end. We still have so much more work to do. But with people like Mabel and people like you right here, I know we can go the extra mile. Because despite all the wonderful announcements, despite that the U.S. government and the Cuban government are finally sitting as equals at the same table, the blockade isn't over. They've been talking about more Americans traveling down to Cuba, and that's fantastic, that's great. But the blockade is still there. The main piece of annoyance for all Cubans is still there. And when folks ask me to talk about, what my life is like in Cuba, I say it's wonderful, because it truly is. I mean, I live on an island where, as a young black man, I am not afraid to be shot at. I can walk down the street safely. I went to a dentist for the first time in Cuba. I grew up in the South Bronx. Healthcare was not a right when I grew up, when I was growing up. I've done so many firsts. I've had so many firsts in Cuba. Being a person of color, being a person who's poor, who's working class, and being amazed to live surrounded by a people so full of love. People who consistently, even though they've been so attacked, so violated, so repressed by the U.S. government. I mean, when I think of the blockade, it's really literally a foot on the neck of the Cuban people. And it's a heavy foot. It's not any foot. It's the foot of the world's strongest, biggest empire. So it's quite heavy on their backs. And yet, they love so much. They keep living inspired by their revolution, inspired by all the things that they have been able to change with their own hands. In 55 years, they've changed so much of their country. And I get inspired when I'm with folks my age. I'm 26. I have one college degree that I'm still trying to pay for. And I have kids my age who are saying, well, I already got my doctorate, and 2 masters, and I'm going for the 2nd doctorate right now. It's like, wow. They can learn as much as they want and whatever they want without having to pay a cent for it. All those things just leave me all the time sort of dumbfounded. Why did it take me so long to come live in Cuba? And at the same time, if the Cubans are doing all of this, if the Cubans are trying to build their own project, they're trying to build something new, they're trying to build something different, why are we still hurting them so much? Why are there young people my age who have never known anything but the blockade? And I know, because this is a crowd, a room full of committed people, that I don't need to explain to you what the blockade is. You know it very well. I don't need to share statistics, because numbers are just numbers. But I always like to remind my friends here in the United States, because that's what my friends in Cuba asked me to do. Tell the people in the U.S. that we love them. We love the people of the United States. They make a difference between the oppressive, imperialist government of the United States and the generous, loving people of the United States. People who at many times throughout history have been capable of putting their lives at risk for the people of Cuba, but for people all over the world. They always talk about Lucius Walker, a great friend of ours who's passed away. And, I get sort of choked up because I'm with Mabel. We were in buses together with Lucius Walker so many times, on so many different highways and so many different memories. But Lucius was the type of guy who, no matter what they told him, he said, I'm still going to Cuba, and I'm going without a license. Love is our license. Every time, I remember sometimes I was working with Lucius in the office for his last years of life, and I remember sometimes, and Bill was there many times, when OFAC would call, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, those crazy folks in D.C. who think they can license everything. And they would say, well, Lucius, you don't have to bother this year with a Caravan. We'll give you a license. We'll give you permission. You can take a few things and you can take your people and go to Cuba. You know, we don't want to have to hassle you so much. You know, you've given us enough trouble already. And he would because Lucius was that type of guy, he was very soft. He had a soft voice. He didn't raise his voice very much, but he would very gently and very quietly say, well, no thank you. My people in Cuba would not allow it. The day we take a license is the day we betray the people of Cuba. And that's the spirit that keeps us going right now. We cannot betray the people of Cuba. After all that they have gone through, 55 years of this immoral, criminal blockade that's been grinding out their lives, and just because it would make it a little bit more convenient for us to fly on a plane straight out of New York, will we take a license bill? No. No, it's not the time for that yet.
Right.
Not the time for that
We'll go to
yet.
Cuba when they lift the blockade and everybody can go. Then we'll go to Cuba with the rest of the people. But until they do that, we're going to be in those old raggedy buses out there.
And that's our commitment. You know, that is our commitment. You know, people say, well, Manolo and Bill, you two are just crazy. Why the hell are you driving around in these old buses, rickety buses, in the middle of summer, when it's the hottest, just going around in circles, talking to people, collecting aid? Why? Why, when Obama has made these announcements? Why, when you can just get a license and go to Cuba? Why, when they're already giving licenses to take aid? And we have to admit, we are a bit insane. We don't listen to our brains very much. We listen to our hearts. And our hearts are now insisting that we gotta keep pushing. It's like I can almost see victory. It's like, it's down the street. It's visible, it's right there. But it will take us walking a bit further. When we had our Caravan send-off in DC just a few days ago, we had a sister, Lucy Murphy, who sang a wonderful song. Ain't We Got a Right to the Tree of Life. I don't know if any of you have ever heard that song.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's a couple verses in that song that say that we are on a rocky and dangerous road. But that ain't stopping us from walking on it. And my question to all of you tonight is, how many of you are willing and able to continue walking on that rocky and dangerous road with Pastors for Peace? I'm glad she just shamed all of you, because she did raise her hand. And that's the type of commitment I love to see. I'm serious, because sometimes I get kind of sad, because friends of ours who've been in this game for a long time are kind of saying, well, this is the time to kind of relax and step back, you know, smoke our cigars and enjoy our rum now that you can bring them back legally. And I say that's great, but that's not what we're in this game for. We're in this to win it. And the Cuban people need us to win it. This is the time of action. And action for me means a million things. That's why I admire Mabel so much. I admire people in this room so much, because everyone here has found a way to be active on the issues of Cuba, but on so many other social justice issues. It's just a question of how you decide to be active. My wobbly brothers and Efrain today came out to be active by helping us to load boxes. Not everybody feels like loading boxes. Not everyone has to load boxes. But they showed their true industrial workers of the world solidarity by loading boxes with us today. And I appreciate that so much because it's something. And that something ain't no little something. It's a big something. Because every time they put their hands on one of those boxes, it's love going to Cuba. And believe me or not, but the U.S. government is afraid of that shit. They really are. You should see it when we get down to the border. Mabel can tell you more stories afterwards. It's like they have all of Customs and Border Patrol gets to do a yearly reunion in McAllen just to wait for us.
They have 100 to 1 of us, our Customs and Border Patrol agents there. So for every person there, there's 100 of them. It's like the biggest group of law enforcement that you've ever seen in your life. You know, over a bunch of people that are taking old, used equipment to Cuba to give to the people. It's like they take a computer away from you. Last year they took 6 computers away. We sent a truck down, picked up the computers. The next morning we went to Cuba. We carried those same 6 computers across the bridge with us. They put them in the container and sent them to Cuba. And they had to take something. You know, they had to take something. One time we were at the border and they cut the cords off the sewing machines. You know, it's like, what's a sewing machine gonna do? You know, or a toaster. They cut the cord off of a toaster. Why we were taking a toaster, I have no idea, because I don't think there's a toaster in Cuba except maybe that one. But it's like, why did they do those crazy things? You know,
well, you know what they say?
It's like we have to do what we're doing in order to make the people of the United States understand that it's like, we can't do the stuff that we do without the people in this room. Without 5 other groups of people across the United States that are doing the exact same thing that we're doing tonight, talking about Cuba. We can't do it. We couldn't even begin to have made 26 trips to Cuba without people in each city that we go to. It's impossible for us to do it. We couldn't do it. And we couldn't do it without the money that's raised at these events to buy the fuel, to buy the stuff that we need to take to Cuba when we go. We can't do it. It's impossible. It's an impossible feat. We'd have been done 26 years or 24 years ago if it hadn't been for the people of the United States that are doing what we're doing right here every single year. They come together to help us. We couldn't do it. That's what makes me go every year, is because I don't know how many times I've been here, but it's like I see the same faces here that I've seen, you know, 10 or 15 times ago. I see the same people here, and it's like, it's because you have commitment to ending the blockade of Cuba, to end the restriction of the people of the United States. And everything that you do has something to do with helping some part of something, somewhere. So it's very important that we have people like you to help us, because without you, we can't do it. We couldn't even begin to do it.
And, you know, it's going back to talk about Cuba and all their love. I have the honor of being able to work with about 104 U.S. medical students who are studying in Cuba. Kids from the places where presidents don't like to visit very often. Kids from the South Bronx, kids from Detroit, kids from Oakland, kids from Nebraska, kids from the native reservations, kids who are told that they're too stupid because of their color of their skin or because of their income. And Cuba opens their doors and says, you know, you are our children now. You are Cubans who just happen to be born outside of Cuba. And Cuba gives them this amazing opportunity to study for 6-7 years, fully on scholarship. And you know, when I actually get to take them down in Cuba, and some of them get nervous. I was talking with one who's going down in August right now, and Bill was asking me, is she nervous? Yeah, she's hella nervous. Because she's already worried if she's going to be able to learn Spanish, if she's going to be able to adapt to the food and the culture. And I said,
She'll be all right.
bring yourself and bring a few pairs of clothes and you'll be good. The Cubans will take care of the rest. Because they have just such a spirit of saying, nothing is really ours. If we're on this planet, we're on this island, it's to do something for humanity. And that's just the Cuban ethic, that's just the Cuban way of doing things. And they keep saying, you know, I always have to ask, We have to be very, respectful and honest. And I always say to the Cubans, do you really want to continue the scholarship program? Can you continue to afford it? I mean, Cuba's going through a terrible economic crisis. The blockade is not getting any easier. Even though, the newspapers like to, make it seem like Cuba's all great and the new restaurants and all sorts of stuff. But the economic situation in Cuba is very difficult. Because every time, and that doesn't come out in the news very often either, is that every time Cuba tries to do some commercial transaction, some economic transaction somewhere, it gets fined. Every time I think I found a new way to get some urgently needed medicine, it turns out that the U.S. has something to do with it, and they cannot purchase it. Every time they think they can get away with buying something from a third country, it turns out the U.S. Embassy calls that company and says, don't sell to Cuba. And that's making life in Cuba more difficult as we speak. So I have to be honest and ask the Cubans, can you still do this? We're talking about $80,000 per student.
A year.
To feed them, to house them, to give them their studies. And that's nothing compared to what medical school costs here in Cuba, but it's in the U.S., but it's something. And the Cubans very humbly and very, I don't know why you even ask. This is our responsibility. This is what we are doing. Don't ask too many questions. Just keep sending the kids down. And that's where I say, who are these people? That's where I stay dumbfounded again, because one group of people insist so much on loving others. And that's where I question the U.S. and say, well, who are the true Christians? The people who swear on the Bible every day? The people who say God, 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 but do not practice justice? Well, the Cubans practice justice and may not say God, God, God. But to me, they are the true Christians. Because they feed the poor, they clothe the naked, they free the prisoners, and call out justice. That's the type of country I live in, that I'm honored to live in. That's the type of country that I'm willing to put my life on the line for. That's the type of country I know all of you love and defend in so many different ways. And I don't want to go much longer because I know we have more food to eat, more cackling among ourselves to do. But I want to bring Mabel on here for a moment. And I want Mabel to give me a hug.
This is really painful.
I like hugs because in my culture, I believe that hugs are a way of expressing commitment. When we hug each other, we're saying, yes, we're going to do this. So before you leave this room,
Hug somebody.
Before or after you make another donation, please come give me and Bill a hug. So that we can make sure that we know that you are in the struggle with us, and so that we can take that hug back to Cuba. Thank you.
A couple of things. A basket, so I'm passing the plate. Many people have reached deep in their pockets already and given. I'm just going to send this around and see if we can get a little bit more. To date, we've raised $1,030, and I'm going to have Martin help me add up the checks that have come in, but if there's somebody that would like to add some more to this, we'd be very happy to give it. And you can IFCO, IFCO/Pastors for Peace. And then...
And make sure not to write that wonderful word Cuba on.
Okay, no, IFCO, Pastors for Peace. The other thing, we take the concrete aid, but as you heard Manolo, we have real responsibility to lift that blockade. This is also a political act of defiance of civil disobedience when people cross that border. So I prepared a postcard for everyone, 3 postcards for everyone to sign. I'm not sure if Tonko is your representative. He may not be, but I know that Gillibrand and Schumer are your senators. There is now a bill in the Senate, and there is now a bill in the House. And both these bills would lift the embargo and take away the restrictions to travel. So I'm asking that you not take it with you, that you sign it here, and I'm going to make sure they all go in the mailbox. So I'm going to circulate. We'll start with Gillibrand. So if anybody hasn't signed these, take one and then pass them around. And over here is Tonko. I'm not sure that works for everybody. He's the representative. And over here is Schumer. And it's also good to call them. I think while Manolo is here, you might have some questions, because this is a young man who's living in Cuba and studying at a seminary. You might have questions about Latin School of the Americas. You might have questions about how the economy impacts. So I would say take advantage of what it is you'd like to know from somebody who's there.
Yes.
I'm just curious, what happens when everything gets shipped to Cuba, right? And you all go to Cuba and meet it? I was kind of wondering what happens
So
in terms of the distribution, and how that works.
Yeah, it's an interesting process because we truly respect Cuban self-determination. We don't distribute the aid ourselves.
Right.
All the aid is handed over to an ecumenical distribution committee made of different churches in Cuba, and they decide where it goes based on the country's national plan of priorities. So the wheelchair will probably not go to Havana. It'll probably go to some little town up in the mines where they need it the most. The computer will go to a school in Santi Spiritus, because that's where it really needs to go. The medical aid is handed over to the Ministry of Public Health, and they do the same thing. They figure out, which hospital is in most urgent need of of this particular medicine. And we trust the Cubans to the point that over the years, we've seen that the aid actually does get to where it needs to go, and that they don't need no Americans meddling in their distribution process.
Actually, I was there one year when the aid got there. I stayed behind to do a bicycle project there, and they document on 3 pieces of paper every piece of aid that comes out of that warehouse, where it goes and who gets it. Because they never want the United States government to say, oh, the government took the computers, or oh, the government took the wheelchairs. So I know for a fact that it's like, I've seen a little jitney come down out of the mountains, traveled hours and hours to get to Havana, and picked up a computer and a box of rubber gloves. And then went back up to the mountain again. That's because they have a list, they have a way, they put their name on a list, and they have what they need in that community, and the distribution committee goes through that list and tries to the best of their ability to make sure that everybody that's on that list gets what they ask for. But sometimes they don't get enough computers, sometimes they don't get enough rubber gloves, sometimes they haven't got enough walkers. So it's like when the aid is gone, it's gone. But we have a thing that, like, once the aid is on that ship in Mexico, heading for Cuba, it's no longer our responsibility. It's the Cuban people's responsibility to do with what they want to do with it. And we respect that, because it's their stuff. We've collected it for them. They've asked us, they send us a list every year to try and fulfill that list of stuff that they need. And that's what we send out to Mabel and other people in other cities. So we try to collect the stuff that's on that list that they want. But we can't take enough, And it's like, it's not even important. The aid is not even important to the project that we do. We use the aid to, like, bring people together, to talk about Cuba. Because we can't even begin to give Cuba enough stuff. It's the people that we take to Cuba that we hope will come back and be long-standing people that, like, work to lift the embargo. Some of them come back and they work and they do different things with us. Some of them come back and you never see them again. But it's like our hopes is that the people we take there will come back and be politicized and, like, do work in the United States to end the blockade. But who's to say? You know? Who's to say who's right and who's wrong? You know, everybody does what they can do. You know?
Would you like to share something, a message for our viewers who are speaking only in Spanish of the Latino community, the community of Albany? Algo compartir con ellos también, por favor.
Bueno, familia, estamos en esta caravana de amistad con Cuba. Es la edición número 26 y seguimos insistiendo en que Cuba es nuestra amiga, Cuba es nuestra nación hermana. Como latinoamericanos tenemos que estar de pie y apoyar a Cuba contra este bloqueo y seguir insistiendo de nuevo de que Cuba es nuestro país hermano, es nuestra nación hermana y tenemos que respetar su soberanía. Por eso estamos aquí en esta guagua recogiendo ayuda para mandar a Cuba y de nuevo seguir insistiendo que ya se ha acabado el tiempo del bloqueo, hay que romper el bloqueo y llegar hasta Cuba.
Yeah.